The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty platform, and Amelia Davenport stepped down into the blazing Arizona sun with nothing but a worn carpetbag and secrets she prayed would die in the desert heat. Kingman sprawled before her like a promise written in weathered wood and sun-bleached canvas. A frontier town perched on the edge of civilization where the railroad had brought hope, and the desert had taught humility. It was 1883, and she had traveled 2,000 miles from Boston to escape the wreckage of her former life, carrying the weight of a scandal that would have destroyed her if she had stayed. The air tasted different here, dry and clean, nothing like the humid salt tang of the Atlantic coast. Amelia adjusted her dark blue traveling dress, already wilting in the September heat, and surveyed the main street with eyes that had learned to assess danger quickly. False-fronted buildings lined both sides of the wide dirt road, their painted signs promising everything from dry goods to salvation. A freight wagon creaked past, pulled by a team of oxen that moved with patient indifference to the heat. Somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil, the sound sharp and insistent in the still air. She had exactly $43 in her reticule, the remainder of the money she had taken from her savings before fleeing Boston. It would have to be enough to start over. Her references were forged, her story carefully constructed. Here in Kingman, she would be a widow from the East, respectable and alone, seeking a fresh start in the Arizona territory. No one would know about Jonathan Whitmore or the night she had discovered him dead in his study. No one would know about the detective who had started asking questions, his eyes sharp with suspicion when he learned about Jonathan's intention to change his will in her favor. No one would know that she had been his private secretary, that society had whispered about their relationship behind gloved hands, or that his actual wife had looked at her with pure hatred at the funeral. Innocent or guilty, Amelia had known that the truth would not save her. Boston society had already decided her fate, so she had run. The hotel was 2 stories of whitewashed adobe, its deep porch offering blessed shade. Amelia made her way toward it, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. She was almost to the wooden steps when a horse and rider came around the corner at a speed that seemed reckless for the crowded street. The bay gelding was lathered with sweat, its sides heaving, and the man in the saddle sat with the easy grace of someone born to ride. He pulled up short when he saw her, the horse dancing sideways. Amelia found herself looking up into a face that the sun and wind had carved into something striking rather than handsome, all strong bones and weathered skin. His eyes were the color of smoke, gray and watchful beneath the brim of a dusty black hat. He could not have been more than 27 or 28, she guessed, though the West seemed to age men differently than the East. "Sorry, madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried the accent of somewhere farther south. "Did not mean to startle you." "You did not," Amelia lied, lifting her chin. She had been startled, but she would not show it. She had learned in the past months that showing weakness invited questions. He studied her for a moment, those gray eyes taking in her traveling dress and carpetbag with an assessment that was purely practical. "New to Kingman, I am." She offered nothing more. A smile touched the corner of his mouth, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Welcome, then. Fair warning, it gets hotter before it gets cooler." He touched the brim of his hat and urged his horse forward, heading toward what appeared to be a stable at the end of the street. Amelia watched him go, something in her chest loosening slightly. He had not stared, had not tried to engage her in conversation beyond simple courtesy. In Boston, men had looked at her with speculation, wondering if the rumors were true, wondering if she had really killed Jonathan Whitmore for his money. This cowboy had looked at her and seen only a stranger in a strange town. The hotel clerk was a narrow man with thinning hair who introduced himself as Mr. Pemberton. He had a room available, he said, for $2 a week. It was small but clean, with a window that overlooked the main street and a bed that did not sag too badly. Amelia took it, paid for 2 weeks, and carried her carpetbag up the narrow stairs. Once inside with the door closed, she allowed herself to sit on the edge of the bed and breathe. She had made it. 2,000 miles from Boston, from the detective's questions and the scandal and the nightmares about finding Jonathan's body. She pressed her hands to her face and took several slow breaths, willing the trembling to stop. After a few minutes, she stood and went to the window. The street below was busy with the afternoon traffic of a frontier town. Cowboys rode past, their leather chaps dusty from the range. Women in calico and gingham moved between shops, their sunbonnets bright spots of color. A freight wagon loaded with barrels made slow progress toward the railroad depot. It was all so different from Boston, so raw and unfinished. Amelia found it strangely comforting. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the narrow wardrobe and arranging her hairbrush and pins on the washstand. At the bottom of the carpetbag, wrapped in a linen handkerchief, was the cameo that had belonged to her mother. It was the only thing of real value she owned, the only connection to the life she had lived before her parents died and left her alone at 19. She held it for a moment, then tucked it into the drawer of the small bedside table. Tomorrow she would look for work. Tonight she would rest. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier and the dreams that had followed her west. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing and lay in the gray light, listening to Kingman come to life around her. By the time she dressed and went downstairs, the street was already busy. Amelia bought a simple breakfast at a cafe run by a cheerful Mexican woman who spoke more Spanish than English, then set out to explore the town properly. She needed work, and she needed it soon. $43 would not last forever. The general store seemed like a logical place to start. The proprietor, a stout man named Mr. Henderson, listened to her inquiry with polite skepticism. "I do all the bookkeeping myself, madam," he said, "and my wife handles the counter. But you might try the hotel. Mr. Pemberton's been looking for help with the laundry." Laundry work would destroy her hands and pay pennies, but Amelia thanked him and moved on. The hotel was a possibility, but she wanted to exhaust other options first. She had been well educated, could read and write and cipher better than most men. Surely there was work for someone with her skills. The newspaper office was a single room that smelled of ink and paper. The editor, a young man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, shook his head before she finished asking, "I do my own typesetting, madam, cannot afford to hire help." The bank was more promising. The manager, a careful man named Mr. Thornton, actually seemed interested when she explained that she could keep books and had experience with correspondence. "I might have something," he said slowly. "Let me think on it. Come back tomorrow." It was better than an outright refusal. Amelia thanked him and stepped back into the afternoon heat. She was walking past the stable when she heard the commotion. Raised voices, the sound of hooves striking wood, a string of curses that would have scandalized her Boston acquaintances. Curious despite herself, Amelia moved toward the wide doors. Inside the dim interior, 3 men were attempting to control a buckskin mare that clearly wanted nothing to do with them. The horse was rearing and plunging, eyes rolling white, while the men shouted conflicting advice at each other. Amelia saw the danger a moment before it happened. The mare came down hard, and one of the men stumbled backward, directly into the path of her striking front hooves. The cowboy from yesterday appeared from nowhere, moving with startling speed. He grabbed the man by the collar and hauled him clear just as the mare's hooves slashed through the space where he had been standing. Then the cowboy turned his attention to the horse, his voice dropping to something low and steady that Amelia could not quite hear. The change was remarkable. The mare's ears flicked forward, her rolling eyes focusing on him. He moved closer, still talking in that low voice, and the horse went still. Within moments, he had his hand on her neck, stroking the sweaty coat with long, sure movements. "Easy now," he murmured, loud enough now for Amelia to hear. "Nobody here is going to hurt you. Easy." The other men had backed away, giving him space. Amelia realized she was holding her breath. The cowboy continued to gentle the mare, his movements patient and unhurried. After several minutes, the horse dropped her head and blew out a long breath, the tension leaving her body. He ran his hands over her legs, checking for injuries, then led her to a stall with no more fuss than if she were a child's pony. When he emerged, he saw Amelia standing in the doorway. Recognition flickered across his face. "Afternoon, madam." "That was extraordinary," she said before she could think better of it. He shrugged, pulling off his work gloves. "She was scared, is all. Someone probably treated her rough and she expected more of the same." One of the other men, a burly fellow with a beard, laughed. "That is why you are the horse whisperer, Cade. The rest of us would have been kicked into next week, Cade. So that was his name." Amelia filed it away without meaning to. "She just needed someone to listen," Cade said. He looked at Amelia again, those gray eyes curious. "Looking for something, madam?" "No, I was just passing by and heard the noise." She should leave, she knew. Standing here talking to strange men was exactly the sort of thing that would start rumors, and she had come west to escape rumors. But something about the way he had handled the frightened mare kept her rooted in place. "Cade Yates," he said, offering his hand. His manners had a rough edge, but they were genuine. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but careful. "Amelia Davenport." "Pleased to meet you properly, Miss Davenport." He released her hand and glanced back at the stall where the mare stood quietly now, eating hay. "You settling in Kingman?" "I hope to. I am looking for work." "What kind of work?" It was a simple question, but something in his tone suggested genuine interest rather than idle curiosity. "I can keep books, write correspondence, manage accounts. I worked as a private secretary back east." Cade was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "The ranch could use someone like that," he said finally. "Owner does not have much patience for paperwork and it has been piling up. Pay would not be much to start, but it would be steady." Amelia's heart kicked against her ribs. "What ranch?" The cross Y. "My family's place, about an hour's ride north of town. My father started it 20 years back, and I have been running it since he passed 5 years ago. We run cattle mostly, some horses." He paused. "It would mean riding out to the ranch, though. We are too far out for daily trips to town." "I can ride," Amelia said, which was true, though her experience was limited to gentle trail rides in city parks, nothing like what riding in the Arizona Territory would require. Cade looked at her again, his assessment more thorough this time. She had the distinct impression he could see through her easy lies and careful facade, but when he spoke, his voice was neutral. "Tell you what, come out tomorrow, see the place, and we can talk about whether it would suit. I will be heading back at first light. You can ride out with me if you are interested." It was a risk. Riding out to an isolated ranch with a man she did not know went against every rule of propriety she had ever learned. But propriety had not saved her in Boston, and desperation made its own rules. "I will be ready at first light," she said. His smile was brief but genuine. Meet me here at the stable. I will have a horse ready for you." Amelia nodded and turned to go, her mind already racing through the implications of what she had just agreed to. Behind her, she heard the bearded man say something she did not catch, followed by Cade's low reply. She did not look back. That night, she lay awake again, but this time it was not nightmares that kept her from sleep. It was the memory of gray eyes and gentle hands on a frightened horse, and the wild hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where her past would not matter. Dawn came soft and pink over the desert, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Amelia dressed in her simplest outfit, a brown skirt and cream blouse that would not show the dust, and tied her dark hair back in a practical braid. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. A month ago, she had been wearing silk and carrying calling cards. Now she was preparing to ride into the desert with a stranger. Cade was waiting at the stable as promised, 2 horses saddled and ready. The first was his bay gelding from the day before, and the second was a smaller chestnut mare with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. "This is Rosie," Cade said, stroking the mare's neck. "She has got good manners and a soft mouth. She will take care of you." Amelia approached the mare slowly, letting the horse catch her scent. Rosie blew out a soft breath and nosed at her hand. "Hello, girl," Amelia murmured. Cade watched her interact with the horse, then nodded toward the saddle. "Need help mounting?" Pride almost made her refuse, but practicality won out. "Please." He moved to her side and cupped his hands, giving her a leg up. Amelia settled into the saddle, adjusting her skirts and finding the stirrups. It had been years since she had ridden, but her body remembered the basics. Cade swung onto his own horse with the ease of long practice. "We will take it slow," he said. "Let me know if you need to stop." They rode out of Kingman as the town was waking, heading north into country that grew wilder with each mile. The desert spread around them in shades of brown and gold, dotted with creosote bush and prickly pear cactus. In the distance, mountains rose against the pale sky, their peaks touched with purple shadow. Cade rode with the relaxed posture of a man completely at home in the saddle, letting his gelding pick the pace. He did not try to make conversation, for which Amelia was grateful. She needed all her concentration to stay balanced and keep Rosie moving steadily. After about 30 minutes, Cade glanced over at her. "You doing all right?" "Yes," Amelia said, and was surprised to find it was true. Her muscles were starting to protest, but the rhythm of the ride was soothing and the desert air was cool and sweet in her lungs. "Not much farther now," Cade said. "Ranch is just over the next rise." The cross Y revealed itself gradually, starting with the windmill that stood tall against the sky, its blades turning slowly in the morning breeze. Then came the corrals, sturdy pole fences enclosing areas where horses moved with lazy morning energy. The house was low and sprawling, built of adobe with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a barn, bunkhouse, and what looked like a smithy. It was not grand, but it had a settled, permanent look that spoke of hard work and care. Amelia felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of it. They rode into the yard, and Cade dismounted in a fluid motion. He came around to help Amelia down, his hands steadying her when her legs wobbled from the unaccustomed riding. "You did well," he said. "Most city folk do not make it that far without complaining." "I am tougher than I look," Amelia said, and was rewarded with one of his rare smiles. A man emerged from the barn, wiry and weathered with silver threading through his dark hair. "Boss," he called. "Did not expect you back so early." "Brought someone to see the place," Cade said. "Miss Davenport, this is Miguel Torres. He has been with the ranch since my father's time." Miguel, Miss Davenport is considering taking on the bookkeeping and correspondence. Miguel's weathered face creased in a grin. Dios mío, that would be a blessing. The paperwork is getting out of hand. Cade led her toward the house, leaving Miguel to tend the horses. The interior was dim and cool after the bright sunshine, furnished simply but comfortably. A large fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and the furniture was heavy wood that looked like it would last generations. Everything was neat but dusty, the home of men who worked too hard to worry about housekeeping. "Office is this way," Cade said, leading her down a short hallway. The room he showed her was small but had good light from a window that looked out over the corrals. A desk sat against one wall, its surface buried under stacks of papers, ledgers, and what looked like months of unopened mail. More papers overflowed from a crate on the floor. Amelia stared at the chaos. "How long has it been since anyone worked on this?" Cade had the grace to look embarrassed. "A while. My father handled it before he died, and I have been meaning to sort it out, but there is always something that needs doing with the cattle or the horses." She moved to the desk and picked up one of the ledgers, opening it to see neat columns of figures in a strong masculine hand. The last entry was dated 1878, 5 years of records missing. "You have receipts, bills of sale, purchase orders, anything like that," in the crate mostly. "Some might be around the house." Cade leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Is it too much of a mess?" Amelia looked at the disaster of paperwork and felt, for the first time in months, a spark of genuine interest. This was a problem she could solve, work that had nothing to do with society scandals or dead men in studies. "It will take time to sort out. Weeks, maybe months depending on how much is missing. I can pay $20 a month to start, plus room and board if you want to stay at the ranch. Or I can pay for lodging in town if you would rather ride in each day." $20 a month was not generous by Boston standards, but it was fair for frontier work, and room and board would stretch the money much further. The practical part of her mind was already calculating that she could save most of her wages if she lived at the ranch. The cautious part of her mind pointed out that living at an isolated ranch with men she did not know was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with money. "What about propriety?" she asked bluntly. "A single woman living at her ranch with unmarried men will cause talk." Cade straightened, his expression serious. "There are 6 men working the ranch right now, including me and Miguel. All good men who know how to behave. You would have your own room in the house with a lock on the door. And if anyone in town has a problem with the arrangement, they can take it up with me." There was steel beneath the quiet words, a promise of protection that Amelia had not expected. She studied his face, looking for any hint of ulterior motive, but saw only honest concern. "I will need to think about it," she said, though she already knew what her answer would be. The chaos of the paperwork called to her, and the ranch felt safer somehow than the town with its watching eyes and inevitable questions. "Fair enough," Cade said. "Let me show you the rest of the place, then we can have some lunch before I take you back to town." The tour revealed a working ranch that was well maintained despite the paperwork chaos. The cattle were good stock, the horses were healthy, and the men who worked the place clearly respected Cade. Miguel's wife, Rosa, it turned out, cooked for the ranch hands and kept the bunkhouse in order. She was a comfortable woman with warm eyes who looked Amelia over with frank assessment before nodding approval. "Is good you are here," Rosa said in heavily accented English. "Too much man energy, not enough sense. You bring balance." Lunch was simple fare, beef and beans and fresh bread that Rosa made in a Dutch oven, but it was the best meal Amelia had eaten since leaving Boston. She sat at the long table in the ranch kitchen with Cade, Miguel, Rosa, and two of the other hands. A young man named Billy and an older cowboy everyone called Slim. The conversation flowed around her. Talk of cattle and water and a fence that needed mending. And she felt some of the constant tension she had carried for months begin to ease. These people did not care about Boston society or dead philanthropists or suspicious detectives. They cared about the work and the land and each other. It was refreshing in a way Amelia had not expected. After lunch, Cade saddled the horses again for the ride back to town. This time, Amelia's muscles protested more loudly, but she set her jaw and refused to show discomfort. Cade noticed anyway, setting an even gentler pace than the morning. "You will be sore tomorrow," he said. "Riding uses muscles city folk forget about. I will survive." He glanced at her, something like approval in his gray eyes. "I think you will." They were almost back to Kingman when he spoke again. "I am not going to ask what you are running from," he said quietly. "Out here, we have a saying. The past is the past, and all that matters is what you do going forward. If you want the job, it is yours. If you want to tell me your story someday, I will listen, but you do not owe me explanations." Amelia's throat tightened. She had prepared so many lies, rehearsed her widow's story until she could recite it without hesitation. The fact that he was not asking felt like a gift she had not earned. "Out here we only look forward," she said softly, testing the words. "That is right." Cade looked ahead at the town rising from the desert. "So what do you say, Miss Davenport? Want to take a chance on the Cross Y?" She thought about the hotel room with its narrow bed and watching walls. She thought about the bank manager who might or might not have a job for her. She thought about the chaos of paperwork waiting in that sunny office and the gentle horse beneath her and the way this taciturn cowboy had given her an out without judgment. "When can I start?" Cade's smile was slow and genuine. "How about tomorrow? I will come into town in the afternoon, help you move your things out to the ranch." That would be acceptable. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence. When they reached the stable, Cade helped her down again, his hands careful on her waist. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow starts early on a ranch." Amelia walked back to the hotel on legs that trembled with fatigue, but her mind was clear for the first time in months. She had a job. She had a place to go. It was not Boston, and she was not the woman she had been, but maybe that was all right. Maybe the desert could burn away the past and leave room for something new. The next afternoon, Cade appeared at the hotel driving a wagon. He helped Amelia load her meager belongings into the back, and she settled onto the bench seat beside him for the ride to the ranch. This time, the journey felt different. This time, she was going home. The room Cade showed her was small but private, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the desert toward the mountains. Someone, probably Rosa, had put fresh linens on the bed and placed a vase of wildflowers on the dresser. Amelia touched the petals gently, feeling tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said when Cade brought in the last of her things. He set her carpetbag down and moved toward the door, then paused. "Out here we take care of our own," he said simply. "You work for the Cross Y now, that makes you one of us." After he left, Amelia unpacked her few possessions and arranged them in the room that was now hers. She placed her mother's cameo on the dresser next to the wildflowers and stood looking at it for a long moment. Then she changed into her work dress and went to tackle the office. The first week was brutal. Amelia worked 12-hour days sorting through the chaos, creating order from disorder. She found receipts stuffed in drawers, bills folded into books, and entire years of records missing. What she did find suggested that the Cross Y was running at a loss, though it was hard to tell without complete information. Cade checked on her regularly, answering questions when he could, looking baffled when he could not. Numbers were not his strength, he admitted freely. He knew cattle and horses and land, but paperwork might as well have been written in Chinese. How did you manage before? Amelia asked one evening as they sat at the kitchen table going over supply orders. Cade shrugged. Mostly by instinct and prayer. My father had a head for figures, but I got my mother's practical side. She always said I was better with my hands than my head. That is not true, Amelia said, surprising herself. You are intelligent. You just think in different terms than ledgers and columns. He looked at her with those gray eyes that saw too much. You are kind to say so. I am not kind. I am practical. She tapped the ledger in front of her. You have built something impressive here. The fact that you managed it without proper bookkeeping is actually remarkable. Cade's smile was soft and did something strange to her pulse. Well, now I have you to keep me honest. The comment was casual, but it settled around Amelia's heart like a warm blanket. For the first time since Jonathan Whitmore's death, she felt like she might actually belong somewhere. The days fell into a rhythm. Amelia woke before dawn and worked in the office until Rosa called her for meals. The ranch hands treated her with careful respect, and Rosa adopted her with the fierce protectiveness of a mother hen. Cade was often gone during the day, working with the cattle or repairing fence or handling the 100 other tasks that kept a ranch running. But he made time in the evenings to go over the accounts with her. Those evening sessions became something Amelia looked forward to more than she wanted to admit. Cade would come in dusty and tired, clean up at the pump outside, and join her in the office. They would sit close together over the ledgers, their shoulders sometimes brushing as they worked. He smelled like sun and leather and horses, and his voice was low and patient as he explained the ranch operations to her. It was during one of those sessions, 3 weeks after she arrived, that everything changed. They were going over the cattle inventory, and Amelia had just pointed out a discrepancy in the numbers when Cade suddenly went still. "Do you hear that?" She listened. At first, she heard nothing unusual, just the normal night sounds of the ranch. Then it came again, a low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Cade was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. "Stampede," he said, his voice tight. Something spooked the herd. He was out the door before Amelia could respond, shouting for Miguel and the other hands. She followed him to the porch and watched as men poured from the bunkhouse, pulling on boots and grabbing ropes. Cade was already on his horse, wheeling the big bay toward the sound of thunder. "Stay here," he called to her, and then he was gone into the darkness. Amelia stood on the porch with Rosa, both of them listening to the chaos in the distance. The sound of the stampede was terrifying, hundreds of cattle running in blind panic. She could hear the men shouting, trying to turn the herd, and the thunder of hooves seemed to shake the ground. It lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Gradually, the sounds faded and the night grew quiet again. Amelia waited, her hands clenched in her skirts, until she saw horses moving back toward the ranch buildings. Miguel rode in first, his face grim. "Boss is hurt," he said, sliding from his saddle. Horse went down in a gopher hole. He took a kick from one of the steers. Amelia's heart stopped. "How bad?" "Bad enough. Billy is bringing him in now." They carried Cade into the house a few minutes later, and Amelia saw blood soaking through his shirt on the left side. His face was pale but set, his jaw clenched against the pain. "Just a graze," he managed as they laid him on his bed. "I have had worse." "Let me see," Rosa said firmly, pulling back his shirt. The wound was more than a graze. The steer's horn had torn a deep gash across his ribs, and blood was flowing freely. Amelia found herself moving without conscious thought, grabbing clean cloth and water. She had nursed her mother through her final illness, and the skills came back to her now. "We need to stop the bleeding," she said, pressing cloth to the wound. Cade hissed in pain but did not pull away. "You do not have to do this." "Be quiet and hold still," Amelia said, her voice sharper than she intended. Her hands were steady as she worked, cleaning the wound and binding it tightly. Rosa helped, murmuring in Spanish, and between them they managed to get the bleeding under control. When it was done, Cade lay back against the pillows, his skin pale beneath his tan. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You are welcome. Now rest." Amelia stood, suddenly aware that she was in his bedroom, that her hands were stained with his blood, that her heart was beating far too fast. She fled to her own room and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. She had been terrified, not just worried, but genuinely terrified that he might die. When had that happened? When had this quiet cowboy with his gentle hands and careful respect become important to her? The answer, she realized, was gradual and inevitable. It had happened in evening conversations over ledgers, in the way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered, in the courtesy he showed her and the protection he offered without asking anything in return, in the smile that transformed his weathered face and the strength of his hands and the honor that ran through him like bedrock. She was falling in love with Cade Yates, and the realization terrified her more than any stampede. For the next 3 days, Amelia fussed over Cade like a mother hen, making sure he rested and changed his bandages and did not try to do too much too soon. He bore her ministrations with patient amusement, but she could see the pain in his eyes when he moved wrong. On the 4th day, she found him in the barn, saddling his horse with careful movements that clearly hurt. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded. Cade looked up, guilt flickering across his face. "Need to check on the north pasture. We lost some cattle in the stampede and I need to account for them. Miguel can do that. You need to rest. Miguel has his own work." Cade finished tightening the cinch and turned to face her. "I appreciate the concern, Amelia, but I cannot run a ranch from bed." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made her breath catch. "You also cannot run it if you kill yourself," she said. They stared at each other for a long moment, the air between them charged with something neither of them wanted to name. Finally, Cade sighed. "Come with me, then. That way you can make sure I do not do anything foolish." Amelia had not been on a horse since that first day, and her body remembered the soreness vividly. But the thought of Cade riding out alone, still healing from his injury, was worse than any physical discomfort. "Give me 10 minutes to change," she said. They rode out together into the clear morning, following the fence line north. Cade moved carefully, favoring his injured side, but he sat his horse with the same easy grace. Amelia found herself watching him more than the scenery, noting the way the sun caught in his dark hair and the strong line of his profile against the sky. "It is beautiful here," she said after a while. Cade looked around at the desert stretching toward distant mountains. "It is. Hard country, but beautiful. My father used to say that anything worth having takes work, and this land has taught me the truth of that. You ever regret staying? You could sell the ranch, go somewhere easier." "Never." The word was firm. "This place is mine. I have put my sweat and blood into every acre. It will be here when I am gone, and maybe my children after me will work this land too." The casual mention of future children made Amelia's chest tight. She tried to imagine Cade married, some sturdy frontier woman by his side, and found the image strangely painful. They found the missing cattle in a ravine, none the worse for their adventure. Cade counted heads and made notes, and Amelia watched him work, seeing the care and competence in every movement. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing, who had built something lasting through sheer determination. On the ride back, they stopped by a small creek to water the horses. Cade dismounted stiffly, and Amelia saw him wince as the movement pulled at his injury. "Let me check your bandage," she said, sliding from Rosie's back. "It is fine. Cade." She used his name deliberately, saw him react to it. "Please." He hesitated, then nodded. She moved close, lifting the edge of his shirt to check the binding. Her fingers brushed his skin, warm and taut over muscle, and she heard his breath catch. The wound looked clean, no signs of infection, but the contact between them felt suddenly charged with electricity. "It looks good," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Amelia." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his ribs. "I need to ask you something." She looked up into his gray eyes and saw her own confused feelings reflected there. "What?" "That night when you first came to the ranch, you had nightmares. I could hear you from my room. You do not have them as much now, but sometimes I still hear you cry out in your sleep." His thumb moved against her wrist, a gentle touch that made her shiver. "I told you I would not ask about your past, and I meant it. But I need to know if you are in danger, if someone is coming after you, because if they are, I need to be prepared." Amelia's throat closed. She had been so careful, so guarded. But standing here with his hand warm on hers and his eyes full of concern, she found she could not lie. "I am not in danger," she said slowly. "Not the way you mean. No one is hunting me. But I left Boston under a cloud, and if anyone from there came looking, it would be bad for both of us." "What kind of cloud?" She closed her eyes, gathering courage. "I worked as a private secretary for a wealthy man named Jonathan Whitmore. He was a philanthropist, unmarried, and we worked closely together. Too closely, according to society. They assumed we were having an affair. Were you?" His voice was neutral, without judgment. "No. But it did not matter. When he died suddenly, found dead in his study, the rumors said I killed him, that he was going to change his will in my favor, and I murdered him for the money." She opened her eyes, expecting to see doubt or disgust. Instead, she saw only patience. "Did you kill him?" "No." The word was fierce. "I found him dead, and I ran because I knew how it would look. The detective investigating asked questions that made it clear I was a suspect. His wife hated me. Society had already condemned me. So I took what money I had and I ran." Cade was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Then he nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me. You believe me." "I do." Simple words, but they meant everything. "Why?" Amelia whispered. "Because I have watched you for weeks now. I have seen how you work, how you treat Rosa and the hands, how you handle the horses. You have got a good heart, Amelia Davenport. I do not believe you could kill someone in cold blood any more than I could sprout wings and fly." Relief flooded through her so strongly it made her knees weak. "What if you are wrong?" "I am not." He squeezed her hand gently. "But even if I was, I still believe in looking forward, not back. You came here for a fresh start, and that is what I am offering. Whatever happened in Boston stays in Boston." Amelia found herself blinking back tears. "You are a good man, Cade Yates." His smile was soft. "I am trying to be, especially for you." The words hung between them, full of unspoken meaning. Amelia knew she should step back, should put proper distance between them. But his hand was warm on hers, and his eyes were full of something that looked like hope, and she found she did not want to move. "Cade," she started, not knowing what she wanted to say. He lifted his free hand to her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "Tell me to stop, and I will." She could not speak, could barely breathe. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and then he was leaning down, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and questioning and full of promise. Amelia had been kissed before, awkward stolen moments with suitors her parents had approved. This was nothing like those fumbling encounters. Cade kissed her like she was precious, like he had all the time in the world, and she felt herself melt into him. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I am glad you did." She was surprised by her own boldness. "Amelia, I know you have not been here long, and I know you have got reasons to be cautious. But I need you to know that I care about you, more than I probably should, given that you work for me." He pulled back enough to see her face. "I am not good with fancy words, but you make me want things I had given up hoping for." "What things?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "A partner. Someone to build a life with, children running around the ranch. Growing old with someone I respect and care for." He cupped her face in both hands now. "I am not asking you for any of that now. I just need you to know that my intentions are honorable. If you do not feel the same, I understand. But if you do, if you think you might someday, I will wait as long as it takes." Amelia felt tears spill over, but they were good tears, the kind that came from joy rather than sorrow. "I feel the same," she said. "I did not think I could after everything that happened, but you make me feel safe. You make me feel like maybe I deserve a second chance." "You deserve everything good in this world," Cade said fiercely. "And I aim to give it to you if you will let me." She kissed him then, rising on her toes to reach his lips, putting all her hope and fear and tentative joy into it. He responded with careful passion, mindful of his injury but unable to completely hold back. When they broke apart again, both were breathing hard. "We should get back," Cade said reluctantly, "before the hands come looking for us and get the wrong idea." "Or the right idea," Amelia said, feeling bold. His laugh was warm and real. "The right idea then, but I want to do this properly, court you the way you deserve. In case you have not noticed, we are living in the same house. Courting might be challenging. Then I will just have to be creative." He helped her back onto her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "Fair warning, I plan to win your heart thoroughly." "You already have," Amelia said before she could stop herself. Cade's smile could have lit the whole desert. "Then I guess I will just have to keep it safe." They rode back to the ranch side by side, and Amelia felt like she was flying. The past still existed. Boston and Jonathan Whitmore and all the ugliness were still real. But for the first time, they felt distant, like things that had happened to someone else. Here in the desert with this good, strong man beside her, she could believe in the possibility of happiness. The next weeks were some of the best of Amelia's life. Cade courted her with quiet determination, finding small ways to show his care. He brought her wildflowers from the desert. He made sure her favorite coffee was always available at breakfast. He taught her to ride better, patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise. In the evenings, they still worked on the ranch accounts together, but now those sessions were punctuated with soft kisses and held hands. The ranch hands treated the relationship with cheerful acceptance. Miguel winked knowingly when he saw them walking together. Rosa fussed over Amelia like a daughter and made pointed comments about weddings and babies. Billy, the young cowboy, started calling Cade boss man with extra emphasis, making the other hands laugh. Amelia threw herself into organizing the ranch's finances with renewed energy. She discovered that the Cross Y was actually doing better than the disorganized records suggested. With proper accounting, she was able to identify savings and even find money that had been lost in the chaos. Cade was delighted and told her she had already earned her salary twice over. "You are good at this," he said one evening, looking over the newly organized ledgers. "Have you ever thought about doing bookkeeping for other ranches? I bet half the spreads in the territory are as disorganized as we were." "I have enough to do here," Amelia said, "but maybe someday." "Someday," Cade agreed. He closed the ledger and pulled her into his arms. I like the sound of that word when you say it. Sounds like a promise. She settled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It is a promise. I am not going anywhere. Good. He kissed the top of her head. Because I love you, Amelia Davenport, and I want you to stay forever. The words should have scared her. A month ago they would have sent her running, but now in his arms they felt right. I love you too, she whispered. More than I thought I could love anyone. They married in November, 3 months after Amelia had first stepped off the stage in Kingman. The ceremony was simple, held at the small church in town with Rosa and Miguel as witnesses, and most of Kingman's population in attendance. Amelia wore a dress that Rosa had helped her sew, simple cream muslin with lace at the collar. Cade wore his best suit, black and sober, and looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and the sanctity of marriage, and Amelia listened with her hand in Cade's, feeling the calluses on his palm and the strength of his grip. When it came time for the vows, Cade's voice was steady and sure. I promise to love you and protect you all my days, he said, looking into her eyes. To build a life with you and honor you in all things. You are my heart, Amelia, and I will spend my life proving myself worthy of you. Amelia's voice shook, but she got through her own vows. I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes, to be your partner and your love. You gave me hope when I had none, and I will spend my life showing you that your faith in me was not misplaced. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cade kissed her with gentle reverence, and the congregation cheered. Amelia felt tears on her cheeks, but did not care. She was married. She had a home and a man who loved her and a future that looked bright instead of terrifying. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed half the territory. Rosa had been cooking for days, and the result was a feast. There was dancing and laughter, and Amelia found herself swept from partner to partner, everyone wanting to congratulate the new Mrs. Yates. But always, her eyes found Cade across the crowd. He was talking to Miguel or thanking guests or refilling someone's glass, but every few minutes he would look up and find her, and his smile would warm her from the inside out. When the stars came out and the guests finally began to leave, Cade took Amelia's hand and led her into the house. He had moved his things into the larger bedroom that had belonged to his parents, making room for both of them. Someone, probably Rosa, had put fresh flowers on the dresser and turned down the bed. Cade closed the door and leaned against it, just looking at her. "You are my wife," he said, like he was testing the words. "I am." Amelia moved toward him, suddenly nervous. They had shared kisses, passionate embraces in quiet corners, but this was different. This was forever. He must have seen her nervousness because his expression softened. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said. "I can sleep on the floor if you want." "I do not want you on the floor." Amelia took a deep breath. "I want you here, with me. I am just nervous. So am I." The admission surprised her. "I have never done this with someone I love. I want it to be right." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble of his jaw. "It will be right because it is us." Cade kissed her then, slow and deep, and all the nervousness melted away. They undressed each other with fumbling hands and whispered endearments, and when they finally came together it was awkward and sweet and perfect. Afterward, Amelia lay in his arms, her head on his chest, and felt peace settle over her like a blanket. "I never thought I would be this happy," she whispered. Cade's arms tightened around her. "Neither did I, but I am going to spend every day making sure you stay this way. That works both ways. I am going to make you so happy you will forget there was ever a time before me." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "Too late. I already forgot. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. The ranch required constant work, and there were times when Cade was gone for days, out on the range with the cattle. Amelia threw herself into managing the household and the accounts, and slowly the ranch began to thrive under their combined efforts. In the spring, they bought more cattle and hired 2 additional hands. In the summer, Amelia organized a deal with a hotel in Kingman to supply beef, creating a steady income stream. By fall, the Cross Y was profitable for the first time in years, and Cade credited it all to his wife's sharp mind and hard work. "We are a team," Amelia insisted when he praised her. "You do the work, I organize it. Neither would succeed without the other. Still, I am grateful." Cade pulled her close, his hands warm on her back. "For you, for this life, for everything." They were standing on the porch watching the sunset when Amelia finally told him the news she had been holding for a week. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. Cade went very still. Then he turned her to face him, his eyes searching hers. "Truly, Rosa confirmed it yesterday. She says the baby will come in late spring." Amelia watched his face anxiously. "Are you happy?" "Happy," Cade's voice cracked. "Amelia, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I cannot find words." He dropped to his knees in front of her, pressing his face to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "We are." Amelia ran her fingers through his hair, feeling her own eyes fill with tears. "Are you ready to be a father?" "I do not know." He looked up at her, his face full of wonder. "But I am going to try my hardest to be a good one." "You will be," she said with certainty. "You are already the best man I know." The pregnancy was not easy. Amelia was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Rosa made special teas and bland foods, and Cade hovered anxiously, desperate to help but not knowing how. As her belly grew, Amelia had to give up riding and limit her work in the office, which frustrated her independent spirit. "I hate being helpless," she complained one evening. "You are not helpless. You are growing our child." Cade placed his hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick against his palm. "That is the most important work there is." In late May of 1885, Amelia went into labor. Rosa and the midwife from town took over the bedroom, and Cade paced the porch like a caged animal, jumping at every sound. Miguel tried to distract him with ranch business, but Cade could not focus on anything except what was happening inside. The labor lasted 14 hours, and every cry of pain from Amelia felt like a knife to Cade's heart. He wanted to be with her, but Rosa and the midwife had shooed him out, insisting that childbirth was women's work. So he paced and prayed and wore a path in the porch boards. Finally, just as the sun was setting, he heard a thin, reedy cry. He was through the door before Rosa could come out, pushing past her into the bedroom. Amelia lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale. But she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Cade moved to the bed on shaking legs. The baby was red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He was the most beautiful thing Cade had ever seen. "A son," he breathed. He touched one tiny hand, and the baby's fingers wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. "He is perfect." "He is," Amelia agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Cade knew. "Charles," he said, "after my father, Charles Miguel Yates, if that sits well with you. It is perfect." Amelia adjusted the baby in her arms. "Do you want to hold him?" Cade was terrified he would break something so small, but he carefully took his son and cradled him against his chest. Charles blinked up at him with dark eyes, and Cade fell completely in love. "I promise I will be a good father," he whispered to the baby. "I will teach you about the land and the horses and how to be a good man, and I will love you and your mother with everything I have." Amelia watched them with tears streaming down her face. "We are a family," she said. "We are," Cade agreed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed so they could all be together. "The best family there ever was." Charles was a good baby, healthy and strong. He grew quickly under Rosa's doting care and Amelia's fierce love. Cade was a devoted father, finding time between ranch work to play with his son and help with feedings and diaper changes. The hands teased him good-naturedly about being wrapped around the baby's finger, and Cade did not deny it. When Charles was 6 months old, Amelia returned to working on the ranch accounts part-time, balancing her bookkeeping with caring for her son. It was exhausting, but she thrived on the challenge. She had come so far from the frightened woman who had fled Boston. She had a husband who adored her, a son who delighted her, and work that fulfilled her. The nightmares about Jonathan Whitmore had faded to occasional bad dreams, and she could go days without thinking about her old life. One afternoon in late autumn, a stranger rode into the ranch yard. Amelia was on the porch with Charles, watching him play with wooden blocks that Cade had carved. The stranger was well dressed for the frontier, in a suit that had seen better days but was still respectable. He dismounted and removed his hat, revealing thinning brown hair and a face lined with care. "Mrs. Yates?" he asked. Amelia's blood went cold. She stood, pulling Charles close. "Who is asking?" "My name is Robert Morrison. I am an attorney from Boston." He saw her face and held up a hand. "Please do not be alarmed. I am not here to cause trouble." Cade appeared from the barn, moving quickly when he saw the stranger. "Is there a problem?" "This is Mr. Morrison," Amelia said, her voice tight. "An attorney from Boston." Cade's expression went hard. He moved to stand beside Amelia, one hand on her shoulder. "My wife left Boston to start over. Whatever business you have, it is not welcome here." "I understand," Morrison said, "but please just hear me out. I have traveled a long way and what I have to say is important." Cade looked at Amelia, silently asking. She nodded, though her heart was racing. "Very well, say what you came to say." Morrison pulled a packet of papers from his saddlebag. "I represent the estate of Jonathan Whitmore. He died 2 years ago and the estate has been in probate since then." "I know when he died," Amelia said sharply. "I was there, and I did not kill him." "I know." Morrison's voice was gentle. "The investigation concluded that Mr. Whitmore died of heart failure, natural causes. You were never formally charged with anything, though I understand the scandal was considerable." Amelia felt Cade's hand tighten on her shoulder. "Then why are you here?" "Because Mr. Whitmore's will left a bequest to Miss Amelia Davenport, his private secretary. $10,000 and this letter to be delivered into her hands only." He held out an envelope, yellowed with age. Amelia stared at it like it might bite. "I do not want his money." "That is your choice, though I would ask you to reconsider. Mr. Whitmore was very clear that he wished you to have it. He said in his will that you had been loyal and hardworking and you deserved to be rewarded." Morrison stepped closer, holding out the envelope. "At least read the letter." "He wanted you to know the truth." With shaking hands, Amelia took the envelope. Her name was written on the front in Jonathan's familiar handwriting. She broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. "Dear Amelia," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and I hope you will forgive an old man his presumption in trying to care for you even after death. You were the best secretary I ever had, efficient and intelligent, and you made the last years of my life bearable. I know that society has gossiped about us, and for that I am sorry. The truth, which I hope this letter will make clear, is that you were always a valued employee and nothing more. You reminded me of my daughter, who died in childhood, and I came to think of you with paternal affection. I leave you this bequest in the hope that it will give you the freedom to pursue your own dreams, whatever they may be. You deserve happiness, Amelia. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. With deepest respect and affection, Jonathan Whitmore. Amelia read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. All this time she had run from the scandal, believing that the world had condemned her. But Jonathan had known. He had tried to clear her name, even knowing it would be read after his death. He cared about you, Cade said softly, reading over her shoulder. He did. And I abandoned his memory by running away. Amelia wiped at her tears, careful not to damage the precious letter. You did what you had to do to survive, Morrison said, and Mr. Whitmore would have understood. He was a practical man. He held out the legal papers. The money is yours if you want it. I have carried it in bank drafts, which can be deposited at any bank. Amelia looked at Cade, seeking his opinion. He shrugged. It is your decision. But the man wanted you to have it, and it sounds like you earned it honestly. She thought about all the years she had worked for Jonathan, the long hours and careful management of his affairs. She had earned that money through hard work, not through any impropriety. And the letter proved that he had valued her. I will take it, she said, and I will use it to help the ranch if my husband agrees. Our ranch, our money, our decision together, Cade said. But yes, I agree. Morrison looked relieved. He handed over the papers and explained how to deposit the drafts. Then he mounted his horse and prepared to leave. For what it is worth, Mrs. Yates, Mr. Whitmore would have been happy to know you found a good life. He worried about you. Thank you for telling me, Amelia said. And thank you for bringing the letter. It means more than the money. After Morrison left, Amelia and Cade sat on the porch with Charles between them, looking at the papers that represented more money than either of them had ever seen at once. $10,000, Cade said, shaking his head. We could do a lot with that. We could expand the herd, build a new barn, hire more hands, Amelia said. Then she looked at her husband and son, at the ranch spread out before them, and smiled. Or we could put it aside for Charles, for his education and future. Or we could do both, Cade suggested. Use some to improve the ranch, save the rest for our children. Children, Amelia raised an eyebrow. Plural, Cade grinned. I am hoping Charles will want brothers and sisters someday, but only if you want more. I do, Amelia said. She leaned against her husband, feeling the solid strength of him, and watched their son play in the afternoon light. I want everything, Cade. All the dreams I was too afraid to have before. A big family, a successful ranch, growing old with you. Then that is what we will have, Cade promised. He kissed the top of her head. Because I have learned that when you set your mind to something, there is no stopping you. The years that followed were full and rich. With the money from Jonathan's bequest, they expanded the Cross Y, buying adjacent land and increasing their herd. Cade proved to have a gift for breeding horses, and soon the Cross Y was known throughout the territory for producing quality stock. Amelia managed the business side with skill and precision, and their reputation for fair dealing spread. Charles grew into a sturdy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's quick mind. He learned to ride before he could properly walk and followed Cade around the ranch like a devoted shadow. When he was 3, Amelia gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Rosa, who had become like a mother to her. 2 years after Rose came another son, William, and then 2 years after that, twin girls they named Sarah and Elizabeth. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with children's laughter and the chaos of family life. Cade built additions to accommodate their growing family, and Amelia juggled motherhood with managing the ranch accounts, and increasingly, helping other ranchers organize their businesses. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cade surprised Amelia with a trip to Kingman to see a traveling theatrical production. They dressed in their finest and rode into town in the wagon, leaving Rosa in charge of the children for the evening. The play was silly and melodramatic, but Amelia loved every minute of it. Afterward, they walked down the main street of Kingman, now lit with gas lamps and considerably more civilized than when Amelia had first arrived. "You ever regret it?" Cade asked as they walked. Leaving Boston, coming west, Amelia looked up at the stars, brilliant in the clear desert sky. "Never, not even for a moment. This is where I was meant to be." "With me," she stopped and turned to face him, taking both his hands. "With you, always with you. You saved me, Cade. You gave me a reason to look forward instead of back." "You saved me too," he said. "I was just going through the motions before you came. You made me want to build something lasting, to be worthy of you. You were always worthy." She rose on her toes to kiss him, there in the middle of the street, not caring who might see. "You are the best man I have ever known." They stood there under the stars, holding each other while around them, Kingman bustled with frontier life. Amelia thought about the frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 10 years ago, running from scandal and death. That woman felt like a stranger now. The life she had built here, with Cade and their children and the ranch, was more real than anything she had left behind. "Come on," Cade said, tucking her hand into his arm. "Let us go home to our children." Home. The word filled Amelia with warmth. The Cross Y was home in a way Boston never had been. It was where she belonged, where she was loved, where her past did not matter because her future was so bright. As they drove the wagon back through the desert night, Cade told her about his plans for a new breeding program for the horses, and Amelia shared her ideas for expanding their contracts with businesses in Kingman. They talked about Charles starting school, and whether Rose was ready for her own pony, and how William had inherited his father's stubborn streak. It was ordinary conversation, the kind married couples had every day, but it filled Amelia with contentment. When they reached the ranch, the house was dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen where Rosa waited to tell them all the children were asleep. They thanked her and sent her home to Miguel, then walked through the quiet house, checking on each of their sleeping children. Charles was sprawled across his bed, blankets kicked off despite the cool night. Cade covered him gently and smoothed his dark hair. In the next room, Rose slept curled up with a rag doll Rosa had made her. William was snoring softly, one thumb in his mouth even though he insisted he was too old for such baby things. And in the nursery, the twins were tangled together as they always slept, impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Standing in the doorway watching her daughters sleep, Amelia felt Cade's arms come around her from behind. "We did good," he whispered. "We did," she agreed. 5 healthy, happy children and a ranch that is thriving. We are blessed. I love you, Amelia Yates. Have I mentioned that today?" She turned in his arms and smiled up at him. "You have, but I never get tired of hearing it. Good, because I plan to keep saying it for the next 50 years. "Only 50, she teased. 60 then. 70. However long we have." He kissed her softly. "I will love you until the desert blooms with roses and the mountains crumble to dust." That is very poetic for a cowboy. "You inspire me." He took her hand and led her to their own room, closing the door softly behind them. That night, wrapped in her husband's arms, Amelia thought about all the twists and turns that had brought her here. The scandal in Boston that had seemed like the end of the world. The terrifying journey west. The leap of faith in trusting a quiet cowboy who had offered her work and asked nothing about her past. Every step had been necessary. Every choice had led her to this moment, this life, this love. She had traveled west to escape her past, and Cade had told her that out here, they only looked forward. It had been an invitation and a promise, and she had taken it. Now, 10 years later, looking forward meant seeing her children grow and her ranch prosper and growing old with the man she loved more than life itself. The past was the past. The future was what mattered, and her future was bright beyond measure. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. Charles grew into a young man who inherited his father's gift with horses and his mother's head for business. At 18, he was already helping run the ranch and had started courting a girl from a neighboring spread. Rose was 16, beautiful and spirited, with a gift for healing that had the ranch hands coming to her with their various injuries. William at 14 was the family comedian, always ready with a joke or prank that kept everyone laughing. And the twins, Sarah and Elizabeth, were 12 and inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and sharing everything. Cade's hair had silver threads now, and lines bracketed his mouth and eyes, but Amelia thought he was more handsome at 47 than he had been at 27. He moved a bit slower in the mornings, especially when the weather turned cold, but he was still the first one up and the last to bed, still devoted to the ranch and the family they had built together. Amelia had found her own gray hairs and noticed that her hands showed the years of hard work. But she had never been happier. She had expanded her bookkeeping business to include half a dozen other ranches, and her advice was sought on everything from cattle breeding to land purchases. She had earned respect in the territory through competence and integrity, and the scandal of her Boston past was so far behind her it felt like it had happened to someone else. One evening in early spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Cade took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said. "About what? About how lucky I am. About how one decision to offer a job to a woman I did not know changed my entire life." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are my heart, Amelia. You always have been." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "And you are mine. You taught me that the past does not have to define the future, that looking forward is braver than looking back." "We looked forward together," Cade said, "and look what we built." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children scattered around the ranch yard. Charles was working with a young horse in the corral, his movements patient and sure, so like his father. Rose was in the garden with the twins, teaching them about the medicinal plants she grew. William was supposed to be mending tack, but was actually trying to teach the barn cat tricks. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come west?" Cade asked. Amelia considered the question. "Sometimes. But I think I would have withered away in Boston, crushed by the scandal and the expectations. Coming here saved me. You saved me." "You saved yourself," Cade corrected gently. "I just gave you a place to land. You did the rest." "We saved each other then," Amelia said. "Fair enough." "Fair enough." He squeezed her hand. "I love you, Amelia Yates, today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." "I love you too, Cade Yates, more than I have words to say." As the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace. This was her life, the one she had chosen and built with her own hands and heart. The scandal that had driven her west was nothing but a distant memory now, a storm she had weathered on her way to this safe harbor. She had traveled west to escape her past, and in doing so, she had found her future. Cade had told her that out here, they only looked forward, and he had been right. Looking forward had brought her love and family, and a life richer than any she could have imagined. The years ahead would bring their own challenges, she knew. Children would grow and leave, the ranch would face droughts and hard winters, age would slow them both. But they would face it together, looking forward always, building on the foundation of love and trust they had created. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Cade stood and offered his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Yates. Rosa made her special stew for dinner, and the children will eat it all if we do not get inside." Amelia took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Together they walked into the house filled with noise and love and life, ready for whatever the future might bring. She had come west running from her past, and she had found everything she never knew she needed: home, family, love, and a cowboy who had looked at her with gray eyes full of patience and said that out here they only looked forward, so that was what she did. Every day, every moment, she looked forward, and the view was beautiful.